That was Bernie Sanders in Washington Heights here in New York City. And after weeks of fighting over when, where, and how to have an Empire State debate, Hillary Clinton and the aforementioned Bernie Sanders have agreed on the details of their next battle of wits. April 14th at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which it will be the venue, giving the candidates their first chance to square off in person since this week's war of words over just what qualifies someone to be president. And joining me now, Juan Manuel Benitez of New York One Noticias, Slate columnist Michelle Goldberg, and The Root's Jason Johnson. I'm going to come to you first, Juan Manuel, because New York One is going to be at the table in that debate. Your colleague, Errol Lewis, will be moderating. What do you expect to be the first questions out of the gate for Bernie Sanders and for Hillary Clinton?
Hopefully we'll get some substance questions, and I'm sure if New York One is co-sponsoring the debate, that will happen. We're going to, I'm sure, talk about education. It's really important to many communities in the city and also all across the state. Energy policy, really important also with the recurrent problems at Indian Point, maybe fracking. All those issues are really important. Also jobs for upstate New York. So hopefully it's going to be a really substantive debate a few days before the primary.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know also, Michelle, that New York Daily News, now sort of infamous Bernie Sanders interview, you've got to figure that that's going to come up, right? Because there was so much there.
I'm sure it'll come up both kind of substantively, right? They'll have a chance to relitigate these issues about how you break up the big banks because it's New York, what the impact on the economy will be, the impact on where those jobs will go. But then also whether Bernie Sanders can explain his signature issue in a more clear and concise way than he was able to do then, when he seemed to be only able to speak in a level of really broad generalities about the issue that's at the center of his entire campaign. Yeah, especially in New York, where you know, this is where Wall Street is. I want to play you guys the sort of updated version of it. Bernie Sanders had a second crack at it with our own Mika Brzezinski and Morning Joe. And this is how he framed the breaking up the big banks issue this week.
By what authority and how would you go about breaking up the largest financial institutions in the country?
All right. You ready for the answers?
I'm ready. I want to hear it.
You can do it in a couple of ways. One is you can use Section 121 of the Dodd-Frank legislation. And number two, better, and I would prefer it, is pass my legislation. And with my legislation, the legislation that I've introduced says that the Secretary of the Treasury will have the authority to investigate and determine which banks pose systemic risk to our economy, i.e., if they are too big to fail, they could bring down a significant part of the economy, and then within a period of time, the Secretary can break them up.
So obviously he was prepped better for that interview than he was for the Daily News interview. I asked Tad Devine about this earlier, and he essentially said that's what he meant all along. Does this clean this up?
No. I mean, not if you're a Clinton supporter. Then you're like, no, he didn't know the answer when it mattered. And then he just ran and he crammed in his books, and now he sounds smarter. Look, Bernie Sanders is a bright guy, and he's going to be perfectly capable of answering these questions during the debate. But it goes to that larger argument that the Clintons have been subtly pushing for months and months, which is he's got great ideas, but he doesn't really know how to execute. The same thing they used against President Obama. So, you know, it's not going to be something that's going to matter, but it's something that sort of stays in the ether about whether or not Bernie Sanders is really ready for primetime, even though here we are heading into the New York primary.
Yeah, and I feel like there is a lot sort of Bernie sort of centric sort of discussion that is going to take place in this debate. I'm going to go to one more, which is guns. It's an issue that is obviously very fraught in New York. There's very strict gun laws here, but also sort of, I guess, a lot of issues around reticence about crime in the era of Bill de Blasio, whether or not that's true. What do you expect to hear directed at Bernie Sanders on guns, and is guns a vulnerability for him in New York?
Yes, I think we're going to keep listening to the same arguments that both campaigns have been putting forward. I don't know if it's going to be that special, that issue here in New York City or in New York State. I think other issues are going to be more prominent, more important for the electorate. And let me go back, because I think education is extremely important for African Americans and Latinos in the city and in the state. Public education is huge. And if that argument or that proposal that Bernie Sanders has in his platform about free public education, public university, it's huge. It's resonating with a lot of minorities, like African American, Latino students that now are in the CUNY system, in the SUNY system here, and it's really important for them and for their parents. Will that make a difference, though? We'll see at the primary.
It's going to be interesting to see if Bernie Sanders is asked to explain the mechanics of how that would work. I actually haven't heard him asked to explain like how he would actually roll that out and make it work. I want to go to you, Michelle, on what Hillary Clinton might face in theory. So the crime bill has become a thing again. Everyone's relitigating the 90s, and we know that the COPS program, which is what we used to call it, the Joe Biden 100,000 cops into the streets, it really impacted impacted New York, for better and for worse. Do you expect that to come up? And how much jeopardy is Hillary Clinton in on that issue?
You know, I don't think that I think that it's an issue that can make it a little bit more difficult for her liberal supporters who are arguing with their Bernie or bust friends to defend Hillary Clinton's record, right? And Bill Clinton made it so much worse, not because I think he confronted the Black Lives Matter protester, but because everybody wants to forget the sort of language that Hillary Clinton, but not just Hillary Clinton, almost all Democrats used about crime in the 90s, right? The political context is so different now. Hillary Clinton has apologized for the super predators language that she used back then. So for Bill Clinton has apologized for elements of the 94 crime bill. For him to then return to defending it and to defend, in essence, that language, you know, 13-year-olds hopped up on crack. You know, it makes it that much more difficult. You know, part of the problem is that she is trying to distance herself from parts of her husband's legacy while yoking herself to Obama's legacy. You know, as I've written, I think that there's part of Bill Clinton that doesn't want to let her do that.
Yeah, that he's defending himself more than he's defending her at this point. And I wondered, because when we talk about New York, anybody who was here in the 80s and 90s know there was a very particular problem that I haven't heard either of these candidates really address, even though Hillary Clinton became a United States Senator during the peak of the issues like Amadou Diallo, the actual issues of policing and police brutality here in New York. Do you expect that to come up at the debate, and should it?
It has to. It has to, because these are issues that actually resonate in New York City.
Right.
And Hillary Clinton didn't really do much about stop and frisk when she was actually a senator here. And Bill Clinton promoted those kinds of policies back in the day. But I think
Bernie Sanders didn't talk about it in the 80s. He's from New York.
Yeah, and he didn't care. He didn't care. And, you know, and that's, I think, the core issue, that people aren't just relitigating the 1990s. People are saying, you're forgetting the policy. You can't pick and choose what you like. But I will say this. I was looking back at something Clinton's rhetoric, like Bill Clinton's rhetoric in 1992. He had a huge fight with an AIDS activist in March, right before the New York primary. He said, I don't want to have to hear this kind of crap. Ended up winning anyway. Right? Yeah. So he apparently being a fighter and arguing, maybe that ends up working out for you right before you go to the New York primary, because he clearly seems to have this thing where I'm going to defend myself no matter what, even if my policies are wrong.
Even to the detriment of his wife's campaign. And I'm wondering, Juan Manuel, if there is a danger that the debate, you know, that New York One is going to be a part of, ends up becoming so New York City centric that it leaves out the whole vast rest of the state, a lot of which is rural, a lot of which issues like fracking might be of interest to them. Do we risk having it just be such a New York City debate that it leaves out the rest of the state?
I doubt it, because not only New York One that is co-sponsoring the debate, it's also Time Warner Cable News that is watched all over the state. So those questions are going to be on the panel also. So it's a wide-ranging debate that is going to be watched by all the political viewers all across the state. So I don't think those issues are going to be forgotten. And going back to your point, I think it's really interesting, though, that how Bill Clinton has backtracked. Before, like months ago or years ago, we wouldn't have seen Bill Clinton backtracking on something like that. What we see here is that the Hillary Clinton campaign, they want to make sure they win in New York, that they don't have any surprises. Also because the rules in the primary, if Sanders goes above 42%, he might end up with almost the same amount of delegates after the primary than Hillary Clinton, even if she wins.
Can you imagine a scenario in which Hillary Clinton does not win New York?
Sure. I mean, what are they, 7 points apart? They're not, it's not.
I think it's like 13 in the latest polling.
Okay, so it's not, you know, there's been spreads like that in Michigan. It certainly seems conceivable. I think it's unlikely, but I don't think that they can take it for granted.
And what would that do to her campaign to lose this state?
I'm pretty sure that she would still be ahead in the delegates. But I think that it would be a sort of devastating blow, you know, not just because she represented this state as a senator, but also because, you know, part of the argument for Hillary Clinton is her electability, is her ability to mobilize not just kind of the liberal grassroots, or not just the white liberal grassroots, but the real base of the Democratic Party, you know, which New York is a huge cross-section of that. If she can't do that here, I think it would, just in terms of people's confidence in her ability to kind of carry the Democratic banner in November, I think it would be catastrophic for her.
Yeah,
actually.
and it's interesting how both of them have sort of different sort of competing claims on New York. Bernie Sanders was born in Brooklyn, but he hasn't lived here since 1968.
Exactly.
Hillary Clinton represented in the Senate, but she's not a native New Yorker. So they're both making these sort of competing claims. Does that matter? The sort of weird authenticity stuff about riding the subway and using tokens or swiping your card. Does any of that actually matter?
I mean, they're both like vaguely carpetbaggerish when it comes to this. They're both like trying to claim, oh, I'm really from here and I'm really not. I think the thing is this, though. Hillary Clinton needs to win big, right? She doesn't want to win by a small amount. And look, I don't have that kind of imagination. I can't imagine her losing New York, okay? If she does, people will be pouring out liquor. There will be rending of cloth. It'll be over. So I don't think she'll ever let that happen under any circumstances. But that's not just the issue. She has to win it by a large amount, because if Bernie Sanders comes out of New York and hits that 42% or high 30s and says, look, this is her home state, and look at how well I did, then she hasn't put him over. And that's what she wants to put him out of this race before she has to compete all the way to Jim.
And then last time, I'm going to come to you one more time, Juan Manuel. The Hispanic community has been a real wild card because Hillary Clinton dominates among African-American voters, but it does seem like the Latino vote is a little bit more in play. Do you see that being the case in New York?
I think the more Latinos hear about Bernie Sanders, the more they listen to what he has to say. I think Hillary Clinton has deep roots in the Hispanic community and also here in the city and in the state of New York. But at the same time, maybe some of them are experiencing the same kind of fatigue, let's put it that way, that some Democratic voters are feeling during this primary and might start going for Bernie Sanders. However, let's be honest, and most of the electorate and the Latino electorate in the city and also in the state of New York is older people. And that generation this year is going more for Hillary Clinton. That's it. The Clinton voter, all the young voters are less reliable. And they are really energetic, but are they going to vote on Tuesday?
Are they going to show up? My guests are going to come back, and by the way, it's a closed primary state. Cannot emphasize how important that is. No indies for Bernie can vote in this election. It's only Democrats. All right, my guests will be back.